All right, so we're going to learn how to use the external manifest feature to auto-generate sling cargo configurations. First things first, enter in that trip name, enter in a safety buffer. If you want to enter this in every single time, there's a way to preset it within settings. That way it'll save you a couple seconds each time you create a trip. Select all or some of your gear, and then next choose an allowable weight. If your allowable is not a multiple of 100 like this slider allows, click on that keyboard icon and enter it in manually. Next, after we click the calculate, it's going to bring up a load accoutrement selection dialog. Here, you're going to input all the load hardware that you're using, all the nets and lead lines and swivels that you have that are used for sling cargo operations. On the top here, you're going to see the minimum requirements. So based on all of your gear and the max allowable load weight, it shows that in this example, we need 2 loads. And so it's also going to show the minimum hardware that is required. And for this, it assumes that at least 1 net, 1 lead line, and 1 swivel is required per load. So if you include any additional hardware, it's going to then daisy chain those nets together. So it's going to start connecting nets together based on the new inputs that you provide. So only include the hardware that you're using. If there's any excess that is going inside the net or that is in your gear inventory, do not include that here. Include it in your gear inventory. So if you click on this information icon here, it's going to show you how the minimum requirement factors are calculated. So in this example, it shows our total weight, which is 2,149 pounds, which includes our gear weight as well as the load hardware weight. So the important thing is here is that when it generates the minimum number of loads required, it includes the load hardware weight. And so it divides that by the 2,100 pound max load weight, which was gathered by subtracting the safety buffer from the allowable. And then you can see the calculation here on the bottom. And we get a note that says reducing the safety buffer may result in fewer loads. That's because if you look at this really small decimal place, 0.023, it always has to round up to the next integer, right? Which is 2, because you can't have 0.023 of a load. It's got to be at least 1, right? So it rounds up to 2. So if you reduce something like the safety buffer, or you increase the allowable weight, or you say take a gear item off, there is the chance that that could increase that or decrease that down to 1, decreasing the number of trips that are required. So for example, if we increase the allowable weight to 2,500 pounds, boom, it dropped the minimum requirements down to 1 load. You might not always have that option, but you can see here that, oh, now there's 0.919 loads that are required, which rounds up to 1. So it also dynamically calculates it. So if we, for example, increase the number of 20 by 20 cargo nets that we have, it's going to auto update the number of loads that are required, which now got bumped up to 2. So let's jump back to our original allowable at 2,300 pounds and talk a little bit about how the configurations are actually created. So you need, at the minimum number of nets, lead lines, and swivels. So right now it starts it out with 12 by 12 nets. Obviously 20 by 20 have a lot more available space and volume within the net. So if you include any 20 by 20s here, when it calculates, it's going to prioritize those 20 by 20 nets with the items that it receives. So there's going to be a significantly higher portion of items that get distributed to the 20 by 20 nets versus the 12 by 12. It is also going to try and separate hazmat materials when possible. That way, when you're flying, if there's any leaks, hazmat materials don't contaminate other gear items like water and food. You're not going to be able to edit the lead lines because it's going to assume that there's a lead line for every net. And then finally, swivels here. At a minimum, it requires 1 swivel per load, which is always going to be attached to the belly hook of the helicopter. And at the max, you can have the same number of swivels for each and every net. So we're going to calculate here with our load hardware. It's going to take a second to calculate. and then it's going to show up in trip saved. So if you click on that trip, you're going to get an overview of the loads that were generated. So first load is 791 pounds. Second load is 1,400 pounds. If I don't like that, I can jump over and edit the trip here and show the contents, right? So we had 3 nets. It threw 2 nets in a single load, starting with the first load, a 12 by 12 and a 12 by 12. And the second one, which is a 20 by 20, had significantly more available space. So that's why a lot of the items went to that load. And you can see here that a lot of these hazmat materials got placed in their own load. And if you would like to edit or move around those loads, it's pretty simple to do. Just drag and drop. And for example, if I were to delete some of these, if I were to delete the net hardware because I needed different net hardware, I could just go back in and add them. And so if I click on a net, it's going to remove the other net, and then I can add as many as I want. So with that, that concludes the external manifesting option. And if you have any questions, please feel free to jump into the support chat or submit feedback and ask any questions through that route.